You're tuned in to Tomfoolery.
We got another episode of Tomfoolery. I believe it's episode 9, something like that. I'm losing count at this point. Uh, we got Danielle Stumpy. Did I say it right?
That's right, Daniela Stumpe.
Stumpy. We were really good friends in like middle school and kind of lost touch after that. What have you been up to since then? I guess it's been like 15, maybe, yeah, 15 years since we've talked.
That's crazy. And I think that's right. So I moved away. I went to high school. I went to Auburn for college. I have a really boring story. I went to Auburn. I graduated college. I got a job. I'm married now. I live out in the burbs with my husband and my stepchildren full time. But I'm living a pretty straight and narrow life, but I'm enjoying it. But I'm still keeping up with like all the political stuff, all the philosophy. I'm loving that.
That's cool. Have you ever looked into? I'm just now, I guess, kind of getting into philosophy. Have you ever looked at? Are you religious at all? I don't know.
I'm like a spiritual person.
Okay. Have you ever seen apologetics?
Mm-mm.
Apologetics is like Christian philosophy. I don't know why they call it apologetics. I don't understand that part, but apologetics, yeah, is like Christian or maybe even broader than that, maybe even just religious philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And I watch these things at churches where they have debates just about whether, like whether or not God really existed or something. And you would think churches are more trying to like push that sort of thing out so that they don't have somebody like an atheist coming in and speaking to everybody. But no, they welcome them in. They welcome the debates. Uh, they have those conversations all the time. Like, what kind of how are did you go to college?
I did. I went to Auburn.
And that's right. You did just say that a second ago. And did you take philosophy there?
So I took like the required philosophy class. I really wasn't that into it. I had a professor he didn't introduce the topic. He would just pace back and forth and talk, and nobody knew what was going on. So didn't really love it when I was, 20. But the deeper I get into political ideas, less so than policy, the more, of course, I kind of am getting into philosophy.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
the same way. I guess I'm shifting more towards ideas than I am the the actual laws and things like that.
yeah, I think the ideas are more important to kind of dissect and understand before you start passing laws and just praying that they go well. I think if you understand the ideas, you can avoid uh, most of the error in the trial and error.
Yeah.
So,
Um.
question: this apologetics, is it run by? I was just listening to Dave Rubin today, and he had a guest called Ravi Zacharias.
I don't know who that is. No,
Okay.
apologetics is like a type of philosophy. So yeah, it's
Okay.
not like an organization or anything.
Okay.
Um, I I like I that was gonna be my next question when it comes to politics, like who you get your information from. But before I ask you that, I have moved farther away uh from Dave Rubin because I feel like the people who were like really going after him and for what he believes and things like that, the more I realize they're right. Like they're right about a lot of it. Like I'm kind yes, I'm kind of starting to see this where he doesn't make sense a lot of the time. He'll say two things in different places that completely combat each other or are opposites of each other. And then he'll have people on his show where they'll say some really messed up stuff and he doesn't really challenge them on it. But if
Yeah.
somebody from the left comes on and they're like, Yeah, there aren't any presidents who are open borders. Like he'll love to challenge them on that, or think like smaller things that are more, I guess, niche. So like somebody like Ben Shapiro, or there's all of these people who are kind of like getting famous just from ripping on social justice warriors and stuff like that. But then they start to act like the social justice warriors are the left. Like that's everybody on the left, that's how everybody acts. And I see that with Dave Rubin, where he's arguing against policies from social justice warriors as if presidential candidates are running on social justice warrior platforms, and I don't see that as much.
I don't necessarily think that everybody on the left, and the left are not liberals. Those are very different things. As somebody from the Soviet Union, I can tell you those are very different things. So the left, the social justice warriors have overtaken the left. And that doesn't mean that everybody on the left agrees with them, but they're so loud and they're so aggressive, that, I mean, both in sort of they're aggressive online. They dox people. The things they say are so ugly. You've got Antifa, so they're physically aggressive. And so they've sort of overtaken the left to the point where a candidate like Joe Biden has to backtrack everything he says to appease the social justice warriors. He can't just stick with his own points. And I do agree with you that Dave Rubin doesn't challenge people who come on his show. I don't necessarily believe that's the point of the show, though. I can like see it annoys me sometimes, but mostly I listen to his show because I tend to learn something from every single person who's on there. So I like that.
Yeah, I like, and I've said this to other people before. I like his show, and I watch it just because it does have a wider array of people on the show. Um, but it also, like, I guess the I guess what Joe Rogan probably does it right, where he challenges everybody who comes on his show. You have no clue what this guy's politics really are. Like you never really know where he's going to go on with every single guest he has on. But it's not a purely political show, and so it's not always interesting to somebody who's looking for political videos. Um, but if he stuck to politics, I think it would be. I saw Dave Rubin on there one time. And I remember telling people, like, Dave Rubin wants to be Joe Rogan. Like, that's what he's looking to do. He's just not as good at it because he interviews a little bit more than he is like having a discussion with them. And he went on to Dave Rubin went on to Joe Rogan's show one time, and he was telling him, he's like, man, this is it. He's like, this, whatever you were trying to create, like, you have it, man. This show is perfect. Like, this is what every show should be. And he's right. Like, the Joe Rogan show is amazing. Like, that show is amazing. There's too often that I get bored, I guess, with some of the guests that come on, but I learn so much from all the people that go on Joe Rogan. On Dave Rubin, maybe not as often. I don't feel like they're as challenging thinkers. Um, I don't. I think that lots of times they're very. I don't want to say mainstream, maybe YouTube mainstream thinkers, I guess is what I want to say, because there's a big difference between mainstream media and YouTube or online media, but they have very mainstream online media types of thoughts. Like, what's his name? Something of a card. I
So,
can't.
oh my gosh, he was banned from Patreon.
Yes,
Sargon of Akkad.
Sargon. Yes, yeah, Sargon. I enjoy him some. I think that he sometimes says things though that he's really good at attempting to back up what he says. I'll give him that at least. He's really good at attempting to back up what he says, but sometimes he does not do a good job of it, and it bugs me. And I'll say watching people like Sargon and watching people like Dave Rubin, have moved me probably farther towards the left. I don't want to say onto the left because I don't think I'm on the left, but if I was, smack in the middle of conservatism before, I am like right in the middle of, between left and right. I'm probably more of an independent. I'm probably going to vote for a Democrat this election. So I don't know. Yeah. I like, man, I'm blanking right now. It's been a long day. Uh, I can't even think of who I'm voting for, what her name is, but it's the
Tulsi
lady,
Gabbard.
huh?
Tulsi Gabbard.
Tulsi Gabbard. Yes.
Of course it is.
Yes,
She's
it
like
is.
the most normal. She's the only normal person. No offense. Sorry, in my opinion, she's the only person who is not just like pandering to the far left. You can tell that she doesn't hate the country. She thinks there are problems, and there are, and she may not solve them the way I want to solve them, but she loves this country. And I think that attracts a lot of people.
Yes, her patriotism probably is the most attractive thing to me. I like Andrew Yang as well. I thought that at first when I heard his idea of giving what is $1,000 to every American, I thought
Yeah.
that was insane at first. But then the more I thought about it, the more it made sense, and the more I heard him talk and explain these things, the more and more it made sense because you have things like welfare where people are or disability where people are afraid to go out and get a job and maybe work a little bit, or they're afraid to go out and help their community or do community service or volunteering or something like that. And if they were given, I guess, more room and more freedom to actually go out and do some things, I think that would be massively helpful to everybody. And lots of people could decline to get their $1,000, and that would be helpful as well towards helping people. I'm just more so in favor of charity than I am of government mandating that we give people money. But so far, charity is not working on as large of a scale as the government could, unfortunately. And so I'm almost at the point to where I'm willing, I guess, to give in and say, all right, if charity's not going to do it for everybody, if it's really not covering as many people as it should, then at this point, maybe government might be the best way to go.
I understand what you're saying. I don't necessarily think charity can cover, let's put it this way, charity certainly can't cover what government is covering right now. The question is, should government be covering what they're covering right now? Welfare right now is structured kind of like what you said. I think this is where you were going with this, is people can't work. They can't really work, even if they're not making very much, because the government will pull their welfare. Instead of saying, okay, guys, this is what we think a livable wage is. Okay, depending on your location. Actually, not depending on your location, depending on the national average, because you can move. So this is what we think a livable wage is. We will cover the difference of what you can't do for a certain period of time. You've got 2 years, you've got 3 years, whatever it is, to get some training, learn something. That's another issue we have in this country. We tell everybody they have to go to a 4-year school. Not everybody should go to a 4-year school. That's resulted in a huge shortage of high-skilled labor. We have no electricians, plumbers. We are really struggling. My company manages apartments. We can't find maintenance people. We're actually starting an internal program to go to Goodwill and other companies that try to employ people that don't really have skills. And then we bring them on and we start them out in a porter position, and they work their way up. They get certifications and they work their way up. This is what we're having to do because people aren't doing these jobs anymore. And so I think that's the issue, is what the government is covering, they probably shouldn't be covering to this extent.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. That's one of my biggest issues when somebody points out something like welfare for all or something like that. My biggest issues with these things is that it shouldn't be government doing these things. And if there really are, as progressives like to say, so many people in favor of these sorts of things, you can start a private organization that'll do it themselves and you all give them their money. If there are so many people that want this that badly, you can do it yourselves. You really can. When it comes to welfare, I don't understand why they don't just have a I guess, a difference plan where they're going to say, look, you can go work, you cannot work, whatever, but we want to make sure you at least end up with like, I don't $2,000 a month. And so if you go to work and you make $1,000 in that month, we're going to give you the other $1,000. And then if you don't go to work, we're going to have somebody who checks in on you, and you're going to have to do some sort of community service or something like that. Like 20 hours, 30 hours a week or something like that until you do get a job. And while you don't have a job, we're also going to have jobs programs. And then we should, and more importantly than any of that stuff, we should have limitations on how long people can just sit on welfare. And so if you have somebody who's really checking in on these people, who's really trying to help them, but also managing them and seeing what they're doing, what they're not doing, what they're capable of, what they're not capable of, then we should be able to make a bigger difference in how many people are just sitting idle in our society.
I agree. And I think, well, I don't want to be negative, but I think we know why they're not doing it.
I don't know.
You don't?
I
No,
don't
so
know that it's that big of a problem.
Let me rephrase that. Sorry. Let me rephrase that. I feel like I understand why the political elite wants this. That doesn't mean everybody on the left wants it for that reason. I think a lot of people on the left are just misguided. Like they haven't sat down and had discourse with somebody maybe and heard a good argument for not doing it this way. But the elites, I think they know exactly what they're doing.
Sure.
And they have destroyed entire communities with these policies, and it's tragic.
Yeah.
It's tragic. I mean, you look at, for example, what has happened to the Black community in this country is so tragic. Black people brought here as slaves. That's awful. They were freed. They were under very intense restrictions and Jim Crow. But their economic situation under Jim Crow was better than it is now. Why? Because we implemented welfare policies that tell people if you have a father in the home who brings in barely enough money for you to actually live, but more than what we're willing to give you, we're going to pull your welfare check. So what are women doing? They don't have a choice, right? Because even if they bring a man in, he's not going to bring in as much. So they're going to let government be daddy.
Right.
And what we've seen is in Black communities, there is a 70% single motherhood rate. And you hear about institutional racism and that the Black community is in poverty because of racism. But look at the statistics. 2-parent Black homes have a poverty rate of 6.8%. 2-parent white homes have a poverty rate of 7%. It's the same. So where's the racism? I'm confused. It sounds like a family dynamic. It sounds like a culture that these people have fallen into, and it's so terrible.
Well, real quick, with the statistic that you just brought up, I did a whole video on this a little while ago that I never actually ended up publishing, but where you see the difference is when you look at white or black single parent households. There's a much higher rate of poverty for a single parent household that is black or Mexican than there is for somebody that's white. Um, where I get confused though is you look at like Nigerians coming in from overseas. You look at Asians; they're all doing very well in this country, which means that it can't really be racism. And when I said this to a group of people a couple months ago, they started telling me, no, actually, Asians are pretty much considered white people in America, and that's why they're able to do so well. So they don't count as somebody who's a person of color. And I was like, you guys realize that in these demographics that we're looking at with how much each one earns, how many are on welfare or get food stamps or something like that, Asian also includes Middle Easterners. Are you telling me that America considers Middle Easterners white people? I would say they probably currently receive more racism than anybody else on the spectrum right now because of things like terrorism and stuff like that. That online, probably Middle Easterners receive some of the worst racism um, from the alt rights and people like that.
Well, I want to go back real quick to your statistic. I haven't seen it, but I totally believe you. That in single mother homes or single parent homes, Black families are doing worse than white families who are also single parent. But one thing to think about is how long has that white family been in this single parent cycle versus the Black family?
Right.
Needs to be in this perpetual cycle. So the white family, it might be a single mom, but maybe she has parents who can help her. And so she's getting help other places. And by the way, it's not necessarily, this is interesting. I've read that it's not just dads, it's having men in the community who can guide these children, even if they're not their dads, just positive male influences. Well, people tend to live around similar people, right? And so if you're a single mom in a white community, there's probably lots of dads around who your child is going to a friend's house and they're being influenced by coaches and other dads. If you're a single mom in a Black community, unfortunately, there's probably not as many men who can be positive influences because those men have also been part of this cycle.
Yeah.
And so, it's not about race. We're talking about Black and white, but that's not what it's about. It's about culture.
Yeah. Well, the worst statistic, I'm sorry, but the worst statistic when it comes to all of this isn't just what the children are growing up in as far as poverty rates, it's what they go on to be.
Yes.
So it's more about the fact that children who grow up in a single parent household are more likely to move on and have children in a single parent household. And children in a single parent household are more likely to have trouble keeping a job. They're more likely to drop out of school. They're more likely to, the list just goes on. And if you are also more likely to repeat the cycle, then you are actually making it broader because it's not like you're just having one kid every time. You're having 2 or 3 kids, meaning you are making this a bigger and bigger problem every time. And it's more about how it affects the children. Now, I don't read into this too much. I don't. But children who grow up with a single father actually go on to be just a slight more successful than children who grow up with a single mother.
Especially boys. Especially boys.
Yeah.
But look, I have an 11-year-old stepson. And when he was little, I felt like I was able, I kind of got him. Like I felt like I could be a positive influence. But as he gets older, as he gets taller and stronger, and more hormonal, and maybe at times never physically aggressive, but verbally more aggressive, right? I mean, we all go through that as teenagers. Men tend to be more aggressive than women. And so successful men have had to learn to handle their aggression. Who is going to teach a boy to do that if not his father?
Mm-hmm.
And or some sort of positive male influence. And even ADHD, boys who live with their dads, their rates of ADHD are 15%. 15% of them have ADHD. Boys who live with their moms have 30% ADHD rates.
Wow.
That's profound, especially if they have contact with their father less than 50% of the time.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Actually, I've never heard that one. That's crazy. I wonder sometimes, especially I grew up with ADHD, and so did my girlfriend, my brother. I wonder how much of it is new or how much of it was just undiagnosed earlier on, because they they keeps pulling out these statistics that with new technology and the more and more children look at technology when they're younger, the more likely they are to end up with ADHD or ADD. And I wonder how true that is, or if it's just that we're finding more and more out, or we're diagnosing it. Um, we're getting better at diagnosing it the more technology advances. They just happen to be coinciding right next to each other.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good point, but I will say I'd rather take the safe route and not expose kids to technology at a young age. I think it's the statistic is if they're exposed to, I don't know exactly how much time on a screen, TV, iPad, whatever, their rates of ADHD under the age of 2, their age of ADHD, rates of ADHD skyrocket. Um, so I agree with you. I don't think we'll know for a very long time. I don't know if we'll ever know. I mean, because we're not very good about controlling screen time in our house. Like we try.
Nobody is.
It's gotten a lot better, but it's so hard. It's just not a fight you want to have every day.
Yeah.
And so, and hell, I'm addicted, and I'm a grown ass woman, and I am addicted to my phone, partially because I'm addicted to the news and I love reading stuff. But I can't help it. I just pick it up. How am I supposed to expect my 16-year-old stepdaughter to not do that?
Yeah. Kids with ADHD, once it's diagnosed, it turns out they actually learn better than anybody else does with technology. So it like stimulates them hardcore, some part of their brain where they're paying attention way more closely if they're learning through some sort of iPad or computer, laptop, whatever. It's a lot easier for them to pay attention if it's on a screen that they're looking at than it would be with a piece of paper and a pen.
Interesting. Well,
Yeah.
it's great. I mean, it's great that they're finding out all this stuff because most of us don't really want to medicate our kids, certainly not for life. So it's great if they can find resources to help those people learn, help people with ADHD learn the way that they need to learn. That's
I'm
awesome.
torn. I'm torn on the medication because I grew up with it. I got to about eighth or ninth grade and just refused to take it anymore because I hated the way it felt. And I can remember vividly the fight with my parents, just sitting there telling them, "I don't care what you tell me. I will never take this stuff ever again." And pretty soon after, I was still had good grades in school, but I had a lot of health problems growing up and eventually just dropped out. Like I couldn't deal with the health problems anymore and missed so much of school. And on top of that, I was just losing interest in learning, I guess, in that sort of style in a classroom. Because even I guess I was 16 at the time, went ahead and got my GED, went to community college within like 6 months, and I still just was not interested in it. I wasn't, but again, technology, you just put these things on a television, it stimulates that part of the brain and they're zoned in. You can do
Yeah.
the same exact thing with a teacher, just put them in the next room and put them, with a camera and put them up on the TV and they will learn much better just because it's on some sort of technology. So I'm torn on the medication though. I am, because I think that it is giving children um, a, a stimulant like that, um, to where they're more likely to grow up with dependence issues. Um, that's the part that really scares me, and you have to wonder, like, is it worth it then? Is it worth it to know that? Because I ended up with dependency issues all the way up until I was about 22, 23, and that it uh, I don't want to blame it on my medication, but I have trouble separating the two completely when it comes to why I would end up doing something like that, you know?
That's interesting. I hope that they're looking into that. I would assume that scientists are trying to figure out if there is a link ultimately. I guess that's the thing. All this medication is so new. I guess I thought it was new. Maybe it's not. I mean, we're the same age. And so.
Yeah, I was taking like
Not that new.
Ritalin. I was taking Ritalin when I was in like second grade.
Oh,
Um, Moved on to Adderall around like sixth grade and continued taking Adderall up until my second time through eighth grade. Uh, I didn't fail, but I was so sick that I missed an entire year of eighth grade and then had to go back a second time, which is when I met you actually.
exactly. So what did you went to, I think that's awesome. I mean, I think that kudos to you, like for being like, this isn't working for me. I'm going to go get a GED, go to a 2-year school, like do what I got to do to like move on with my, I think that's great. What did you study at community college?
Oh, I changed numerous times. I started out with construction management. Um, by like the third or fourth one I was on, I finished on. Well, finished, not really, but I was on radiology in the end. Got locked up for the final long run, and I was I got all of my like scholarships and everything taken away at that point, and so I because of the charges, and so since then I've had to just find different companies and start from the bottom and try to work my way up that way. So yeah, the kids watching this, don't make dumb mistakes when you're young. I thought that it would all just brush off my shoulders. I could grow up whenever I chose to grow up and it would all be fine. I am still paying for things I did 15 years ago today. So, yeah.
But you are where you are because you took responsibility,
Sure.
right? I mean, you could still be in the same cycle, right? You could have been like, oh, it's because of this, it's because of that, but you didn't. You were like, I'm doing some dumb shit. I need to stop.
Well,
And
going back to who you watch online or who you get your politics from, you ever watch Destiny?
mm-mm,
So
no.
Destiny is great, but he's and I enjoy people who are farther left in their shows. My favorite show is probably the Majority Report. If you ever hear about a guy named Sam Cedar who's nonstop calling out Dave Rubin to debate him, that is Sam Cedar. Sam Cedar is great at debating, though, and it's not just tactics. This guy is massively smart. A lot of his ideology is a lot farther left than mine, and a little pretty close to socialism. But Destiny is not a socialist, and he's very like he debates socialists and pretty much anybody all the time, and one of the things that he asks all the time is, why do they have to be responsible though? Like, why? Explain to me why they need to be responsible. If we have people who can take care of others, why do we need people who have to be responsible? What is the benefit to society with people being responsible? Why can't they just do whatever? And lots of times people's arguments start falling apart as soon as he starts asking those questions. It's hard for me to replicate right now and explain it. It sounds dumb, but especially when they're talking about, like, I guess, minorities having trouble moving up in the in the economic system that we have. Like he's saying, say poor people are having trouble becoming middle class. He's like, and they need to be responsible and get better jobs and save money better and try to work their way up. And he says, but why? And they're like, what do you mean why? Their lives would be better. And he's like, yeah, but people who are middle class don't have to do that. You're not expecting the middle class to become upper class or rich people. You don't put the same amount of pressure on the middle class to do better that you do on the lower class. It's not the same. What are these faces? You don't
I just
agree?
think maybe I'm missing something, but like, I don't have to support the middle class. They don't need my tax money to live. They're supporting themselves. Look, I don't care if you can't support yourself. That's not my problem. I mean, I care from a human, like, if you are a completely healthy person and you choose not to support yourself, that's your prerogative. But don't tell me I have to support you,
Sure.
right? Like, so I really don't care if people want to be responsible or not, as long as they are not taking my money, impeding on my rights. I don't care. And that's the libertarian in me. Now, do I think the world is a better place when people put their best foot forward? Yes, because I think there's lots of amazing things that have happened in this world that wouldn't have happened if everybody had the attitude of why, right? It's almost like having that attitude of like, do your best leads to the best outcome for the most number of people, not just you, but the world. Because what if you are Albert Einstein, and if you just push yourself a little harder, you will discover something amazing. And so I just feel like that's so, I don't know, it's just so anti-progress, to be honest. I mean,
Yeah,
how do you get better when you tell people to accept mediocrity?
I'm not. That's one of my biggest issues when it comes to social programs and things like that. Is one, I don't trust the government to do a great job at anything. Uh, I don't expect them to excel at anything. But most importantly, for them to then make laws to where they are forcing you now to do specific things with your money. And we're not just talking about supporting the government, meaning you're paying your mayor or your president or whoever, you're paying their salary so that they're able to do their jobs, or the fire department or the police department or whatever. We're not
Sure.
just talking about that. We're talking about them now paying other people's salaries who don't work for the government. And I think that it's good to do those things. I think it's nice for you to go help those people, and I do, and I want people to do those things. I don't want the government doing it, and I don't want them mandating that I do that with my dollar.
Yes, I completely agree with you. I totally agree with you. So this is why I'm, very libertarian. I'm like, my government is here to uphold the Constitution and protect my life, liberty, and property. That's it. That's all I want them to do. Otherwise, I want them out of my life. I do not want them telling me what pronouns I can use, where my tax money is going to go. I don't want any of that. I just want to be left alone. And I think, honestly, I do agree with Dave Rubin on this. That's what conservatism is now. Like, I don't know a lot of conservatives that are like, I want things to be like this because I think it's right. I hear a lot more conservatives like, I don't care, just leave me alone.
Sure. The conservatism, the right is definitely moving in a more libertarian way. I
Yeah.
won't call myself a libertarian because true libertarians have this belief that we don't need government. They're almost they have this belief that we shouldn't be taxed at all. There's so many issues with true libertarianism that I have, because I find government to be useful. It has its uses, and I think it should be there, and I believe in a hierarchy and things like that. So I have libertarian beliefs, just not exactly a libertarian. I call myself, I guess, a conservatarian.
Yeah, and I'm probably more of a conservatarian. And of course, now maybe what we think affects people is different. Maybe you don't think it affects people, but I do, and vice versa. Um, and so that kind of gets a little gray. Um, and honestly, I haven't heard that exact definition of libertarianism. And everybody I hear who says I'm a libertarian has a different definition. And so it's just a very vague term.
Well,
Uh,
it's an actual party though, and there are people who run for president under the
yeah,
libertarian label, and if you listen to them speak, they say things like, we don't need government building roads, have the private companies build roads. They need the money, right? So have the roads be built. They'll pay for the roads to be built to their place, right? They want the road to come into their parking lot, so they're now going to pay for it, and the rest of us now can drive on these roads so that we can get to their businesses. And I think that is so dumb. You know, these businesses are also going to start putting tolls on the roads to charge you for driving on their roads and things like that. Like, no, the government needs to build the roads. You're talking crazy talk.
that's interesting though. I mean, so if they put up tolls, but the government isn't doing it, so they aren't taxing you. Maybe that's not so bad. Because maybe you're just paying for the roads you're using. Maybe that's not a bad thing.
I think the government's taxing you either way.
Well, okay, look, if the government said, okay, so we're not building roads anymore, this is your taxes are going down by this percentage, that's, right. We're assuming that it's offsetting. I'm assuming it's offsetting when I say like that would be an interesting idea. I don't know if it's local businesses. I don't know if it's local governments by using sales tax money. Maybe if the income tax goes down, the sales tax goes up. I actually think income tax is completely unconstitutional, or was never meant to be constitutional. I understand that it is now because we have an amendment, but I don't think that was the purpose. Um, I would rather the government tax me on my consumption than my productivity. I think
Yeah,
that's a little bit. I think that's a lot more fair,
definitely.
and I
For
think
sure.
it's good for the economy.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I don't understand when people say stuff like, yeah, the rich should have a much higher income tax and wealth tax because they use all of these resources much more than we do. And I'm thinking, do you not know that there's a tax when they use these things as well? Like they're also paying a tax when they're buying things as well. They're already paying a higher tax rate than us and paying more taxes because they have this sales tax on everything that they buy.
Yeah. And their property costs us, they have more expensive property, they pay more in property taxes, and they pay a lot of taxes. Yeah, I have a real, I'm not very trusting of government. My family is from the Soviet Union. We came here in 1991, right? The wall had fallen, but the Union had not collapsed yet. Um, and so we really don't like government. I don't trust the government to do very much. I love my military. I love my police officers, my firemen. I appreciate them. And I'm willing to pay taxes all day long to support them. But I do not want the government making decisions on what I can and can't do. That do with my own life, right? When it's not affecting other people.
Okay, so we got Dave Rubin. You don't watch Destiny. You know a little bit of Joe Rogan. You don't watch the Majority Report. So what are you watching? Where are you getting your news from?
So I get my news on. I do follow the New York Times and Washington Post, but I double check everything I read that they write.
Yeah.
Um, Ben Shapiro.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll say real quick, because I know people just heard that. They're like, oh, so you only follow like conservative people. But I kind of like Ben because I find him to be intellectually honest
Uh-huh.
for the most part. He can be a little pure, and like, especially when he's talking about Trump, that shit annoys me. He's like such a purist. It's like, get over yourself, Ben, honestly. But I do feel like he looks at both sides.
Mm-hmm.
So I do like him. And I trust him to do that. So he's a huge resource. And then not so much for politics, but philosophy, Jordan Peterson.
So you like a lot of the IDW?
Yes. Yeah. I like the IDW, that group. I love Dave because I get to hear lots of different people. I love Ben because he talks about the news. I love Jordan for the philosophy piece of it and just sort of the life, outlook on life
Mhm.
piece. And so those are probably my three main people. I'm starting to listen to Candace Owens. I like some of the people she has on have been kind of interesting. Um,
She
but yeah,
has interesting people on sometimes, and she can have interesting conversations. She is a very smart woman. She can also be massively shallow and and think in a massively shallow way. If you've ever seen, like, I guess the worst one for me was her and Blair White or Blair Walsh or
oh,
something
I
like
almost watched that yesterday, but I didn't watch
that.
it.
Don't watch it. It is the worst. Like, if you watch it, you will never want to watch Candace Owens ever again. Like,
Really? Why is that?
she is so shallow. I can't explain it any other way. Like, the whole time, she's not listening to anything that Blair is saying to her. She's not willing to listen to whatever arguments are being made against her. All
Okay.
she wants to do is keep repeating the same things that she's saying over and over, even though they don't make any sense. Like, what she's saying does not make sense. Yet she's and has already been refuted 3 or 4 times now in 4 different ways. Yet she's still going to keep repeating it as if nobody has debunked that already. So
Huh. Okay, now I kind of want to watch it just to see like what I shouldn't do, right? Like what should you not do? Because I've heard her on other podcasts. I used to listen to Stefan Molyneux.
Molyneux, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I
And a
kind
lot
of
of
like
people
him.
think he's alt-right. I don't think he's alt-right.
He's
Um,
what's called alt right, and you'll hear now since they've come up with this new term. You'll now everybody like Ben Shapiro and all the other guys who were called alt right before are now no longer alt right. They are now alt light, which means that they are a stepping stone to the alt right. Now, I will say most of those people still are not alt right,
yeah.
but Molyneux, I do believe is alt light. I enjoy him. I enjoy what he says, and
Yeah.
he thinks in a different way, and he can really challenge me on some things. Um, but he is still so edgy enough to where he is for sure in that alt light category.
Yeah, I agree. I like the way he thinks. I think he's an interesting thinker. Um, you know, I understand maybe why people feel like he's alt-right. Um, he's very obsessed with IQ. He has like a serious obsession with IQ, and I think IQ is a great thing to look at, especially when you're maybe even thinking about how to structure society and how we help people. Um, but I don't. He's a little too focused on it, and man, he really hates women. Like, ooh, he's got some mommy issues for sure. So, for those reasons, I kind of have gotten away from listening to him. But I mention him because um, Candace was on his show, and she had some really interesting data, and she expressed herself well. She was an interesting person. That was the first time I'd ever actually listened to anything she'd done. But real quick on Molyneux, um, he was on with Dave Rubin, and Dave actually kind of asked him, like, you talk about how minorities have lower IQs and like all this stuff, but like, I guess we can't tell. Is that your way of denigrating them, or is that your way of sort of bringing awareness to the diversity of our country and the fact that not everybody's meant to go to a 4-year school and we have to play to people's strengths? And he didn't feed him all this, but Molyneux's response was like, yeah, I think it's terrible. Like, I hate that this is a thing, but it is a thing, and we need to talk about it. We don't need to be racist. We don't need to be hateful towards people, but we do need to be aware that it's an issue. It's a thing. We can't just ignore it. And I do agree with him on that. I do. I think if we paid more attention to that, we wouldn't be pushing everybody into four-year schools, and we would be helping people find purpose, which clearly, by the fact that the life expectancy went down due to suicides and opioid overdoses, we have a crisis of purpose in this country. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe part of that goes to, we want to pretend that everybody's the same, and we're not the same. Right. And that's awesome. That's great. Because look, if everybody was like me and like did really well in the corporate world, but holy cow, I cannot put together a chair. Cannot do it. My brain just doesn't function that way. We'd be in big trouble. I mean, I think those people who put things together, build things, electricians, plumbers, welders, they are way more useful than I am. People need them. They don't need me.
Yeah, I had an argument with somebody one day who we were watching a football game, and they start going off about how dumb it is, how much Matt Ryan makes, yet teachers are making, crap. And I started saying, you realize though that like I understand that it would make sense that teachers are more valuable to us, but like that wouldn't make sense in a capitalism as in a capitalist system like that we, because we're not all willing to go and watch teachers teach students on television or something like that, then they're not able to make the same money that somebody like a quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons, which, speaking of, do you watch sports?
Nah, I watch some college football.
Oh my goodness, man. The Falcons are killing me right now. They have so much talent on this team. I just finished watching them play against them. I mean, for people who are watching, you might watch this years from now. So, but in 2019, when we are playing the Seahawks, it was just embarrassing. We have so much talent on this team. How do we have Julio Jones and Matt Ryan and all of these guys on our team and still can't win a single game? But anyways, back to, so do you know Lauren Southern?
Yes, but I don't like follow her.
Lauren Southern is
Stefan are like a thing, not a thing, but like they talk a lot.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. What about Steven Crowder?
I listen to him sometimes. He gets very like animated. Sometimes it can be a lot. But I think he's very smart. Let me ask you something. This is actually why I like Rogan. He is not afraid to have anybody on.
Yeah.
Did you hear his interview with Alex Jones?
Which one? He's had him on like 5 times.
Yeah, he has had him on. I think it was this last time because it was the only time I've ever heard Alex Jones.
The most recent one I saw was episode 9/11 because he was actually purposefully bringing them on. I believe that's what it was on episode 9/11, episode 911. I've watched the last time he had him on, he was upset about the fact that he didn't know that Alex Jones was denying that school shooting, and lots of people got onto him for denying the school shooting, and he had after the episode, everybody was upset saying, why didn't you bring it up? Why didn't you challenge him on that? And he said, he's like, I didn't know it happened. So I remember that episode vividly. But after that, I can't really think of any other episodes that I've seen him on.
Okay, so the one I just pulled it up, the one that I saw was episode number 1255. So it was after that whole thing where Alex Jones talks about like, hey, my bad, I was going off bad information. And he's like, I meant to bring it up. Again, I'm not familiar with him. I just know that everybody thinks he's crazy, which is why I listened to it, because I was like, I want to see if this guy's actually crazy.
Yeah, he is.
He's wow. He's
Yeah,
ooh, it was hard to listen to. I had to like take breaks and come back because he's just so, it's a lot.
yeah. You need to just go to the highlight reels. Those are the best, where people just take all the stuff that he has and jumble them up, and they're turning the frogs gay, and they're like, the super powerful people are trying to turn me into an alien, and
Well,
all of this stuff.
He talked about what are those things? Humanoids and like all this stuff, how like this has been a thing and they've been experimenting on this stuff forever. And I was like, I don't I have nothing to say. I mean, who knows if that's real or it sounds insane,
Mm-hmm.
but who the hell knows, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, he talks about crazy stuff all the time. The reason I ask about Lauren Southern is she's another like alt-right type of person, maybe even alt-right. She denies that she's on the alt-right, but she has a real hatred for immigrants. Like, I don't want to say hatred, but she is adamantly against any sort of immigration whatsoever. And that's what most of her show is about. And I got to a point where listening to her where she would say stuff like, the American project is over. Like, we tried this whole mixing pot thing. It was a cool project. It was nice of us to try, but it has failed now. It's time to turn it around and go back to what we were doing before. And I thought that was just so dumb. Like, I really did. At first, I thought that was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard. But then I thought, well, according to the left, it's almost impossible for immigrants or any person of color to get along in this country. Like, according to them, it they can't find racism in specific parts to prove any sort of systemic racism, but they will still they're still sure that something in the system is keeping everybody who is not white down. And I started thinking, well, then both sides seem to agree on this then. Like, it's not working. I don't know what you take from that though. Like, that's the part. Like, I know that if I turn around and take the side of the left, then I have to believe that everybody's racist and they're all just jerks. And if I take the side of like somebody like Lauren Southern, then I'm the racist. I don't know. Like, I don't know which way to go in that argument. But with those two sides being the arguments, it's hard. It's hard to not agree, I guess, with Lauren Southern and say, well, maybe it is a failed project. I don't know. Like, can we do better than this?
It's so funny you say that because it's so true. The alt-right and the left are so similar. They both play the identity politics game. They both judge people's value on immutable characteristics. I mean, just they come at it from opposite angles.
They're
But
identitarians.
yes, and it's both are evil. Both are awful. Equally so, I think. And when she says it's a failed project, she's a simple thinker, right? I mean, you got to be a really simple thinker to make a broad statement like that, because which parts of it have failed? It started to fail when we stopped bringing people in based on what they could offer. Again, I'm libertarian on this. If you want to come to this country and we can screen you and you're not a security threat, I would like to be able to screen people. You come to this country and you want to work, come on over. Come on over, as long as I don't have to pay for your welfare, right? You're welcome here, as far as I'm concerned. And so all of this began to break down when we brought people in with no skills, who could not support themselves, whose beliefs and cultures not only didn't mesh with ours, but were the complete opposite of ours, and they had no interest in living the American dream, right? That's when it failed. Immigration is wonderful. And I'm not just saying that because I'm an immigrant. I mean, look, my parents came here. We had nothing. My parents came here with $300. $100 per adult, $50 per child. That's all they were allowed to bring. My mom is a medical doctor, or she had in Russia, she was a medical doctor. My dad is a PhD. PhDs transferred. He was able to get a job. My mom went and got licensed in radiology. She does echoes and ultrasounds. And that's how they supported us.
Well, that
And
is one of the arguments of the left, though. I don't mean to keep interrupting you, but that is one of the arguments of the left, is that you have to be wealthy in order to immigrate to America. And lots of people say maybe that's the way it should be, though. Like maybe America should be like the top level of countries, and you have to be better and do better in order to make it in this country. But for people who already live here, that same standard isn't being held. But I don't necessarily think that they that people who already live here, I guess, should have to be held by the same standard because they're already citizens.
I agree with you. I think if you're a citizen of this country, well, that's difficult because we have that whole birthright thing. But if you're a citizen of this country, we owe you a certain amount of just camaraderie, and just you're an American, and so you're one of us, right? And so let's let's help people who need help for a little while until they can get on their feet. But I don't want to bring people here to help them, not because I don't love people, but because we have our own people to take care of. We have homeless veterans. We have veterans who the suicide rate among veterans is insane, and we can't help them. So why are we bringing in more people to help? Let's take care of our own problems before we start trying to save everybody. Because we're not doing anybody any favors, right? What we're doing is, if you think about it, you bring in people to help them who you now have to support. Well, that's taking away resources from your veterans, from your disabled, from your mentally ill, who are your citizens. And now you can't help them because you brought in all these other people. So you're not doing anybody any favors. Eventually, the standard goes down for everybody, right? So people who do work and could make a good living are taxed out the wazoo. They don't want to work anymore. Why bother? So your tax base is going down, your expenses are going up. It's not a good formula.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the things that I'm just torn on. Like, I can't. It it makes sense to say, especially if we're gonna set a line like you can't be a criminal in your country before you come over here. Then anything's fair game. We should set all sorts of limits for what does or does not qualify you to be a citizen in this country. But then you go and look at where they're coming from and what it is that they're running away from and how hard it is for them to get out of that and over here. And then you say, okay, well, I guess they got to go somewhere. Like, why not here? Um, but then they do end up on things like welfare and stuff like that. And so I don't know how to weigh that. Do I say, oh, well, you're just stuck in a crappy country, that's on you, boo hoo? Or, or do I, or do I say, hey, like, we need more people anyways, so come on over. Like, I don't mean, I just say we should want to help people, but there should also be restrictions on that help. And so I'm stuck somewhere in the middle there, not knowing whether or not because people who don't need help, people who are not in that much of trouble, somebody from England or Canada who's not struggling all that much, they're going to have a much easier time immigrating over here, while they're not the ones that need our help, you know?
Yeah, I'm curious. Is there any sort of data that says that it's easier for them to immigrate here?
I'm saying because if they're well off, if they have money, that it would be easier for them as far as having the money to move over here. They're not going to be put on welfare. They'll be able to just buy a place and move over here. But
Mm-hmm.
for people who are in like Mexico or over in Juarez or somewhere or off the southern border where there's cartels and things like that taking over and really making things harder and harder on people. I've got some friends who live in Mexico. I think you know Pablo. You know
Yeah.
Pablo back in the day, yeah. So he lives in Mexico as well, and he tells me about some of the struggles over there. And so I wonder, like, um, it's got to be a lot easier for somebody who's not going through that to immigrate over here than it is for somebody who's massively poor, who doesn't have much money to their name. They're the ones who need our help more, but at the same time, it does make sense to set some standards for who does and doesn't move in.
Yeah, and there are private organizations that do help refugees from countries that are war stricken, or if they're being persecuted in their country, and they bring them over here and they help them get set up. I assume they're being screened, um, and so I don't expect people to come here and like buy a house and contribute to society, but I think you maybe you screen people for, look, and this is very vague, right? But we're just talking in generalities here, but maybe you screen people for potentiality, right? Like, you may not have a great job in Mexico, but you're a trained electrician. Come on over,
Yeah.
right? You're a trained nurse. Come on over. So there's plenty of people that have skills who are poor, but they still learned something, maybe even construction. Maybe they're carpenters. Maybe they can build small structures. All good. Come on over here. Come work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm all about that. Look, I want to help people. I just don't want, I want to make sure we know who's here. That's
Yeah.
really important. I want those people to want to be here, not just because their country is war torn, but because they believe in America and they believe in this dream. Um, and I want, that's what I want. I want those kinds of people to be here.
Yeah. I'm a lot, which is what I talked with other people on this show about, where I'm telling them, like, I'm not against people immigrating. I'm not against helping people, but specifically when it comes to the wall, I don't have an issue with that. That just stops undocumented people from coming in. I'm cool with documented people coming in, just not the undocumented people coming in. And normally they're like, well, but there's way more there's not nearly as many people coming in undocumented as there are people coming in documented and then just overstaying their visas. That's the bigger problem. Let's worry about that. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not worried about which one's bigger, which one's smaller. Let's just do both. Let's set up a wall so that there's not undocumented people, and let's try to get rid of the people or reinstate the people who have expired visas. But when it comes to Ben Shapiro, let's move on to this, because this is actually where we'll have a disagreement, I believe. I am definitely much more of a purist when it comes to the conservative party. I am worried about where it's moving. I'm worried about its identity. I am, I guess, a much more old-fashioned conservative uh, in I I thought that everybody had the same vision of conservatism. I thought we were all on the same page. And then Donald Trump got elected. And then I started thinking, okay, like, this is a guy I thought this would be like a dumb kind of move. This is something I expect the left to do, is just bring in a guy who's just kind of all willy-nilly with the rules and doesn't really care, doesn't have I guess a professional representation of himself, which I would think would be very important to conservatives, is for him to be straight-laced and be very professional and presidential and something like that. And that's something that doesn't matter nearly as much to the left. Yet they ended up voting in Obama, who was one of the most presidential and most, respectable type of people in the way he carries himself. And then we turn around and vote in Donald Trump. And I understand that he may have been our best chance to win, that he is a very useful hammer to just swing around at things, and hopefully it hits a nail once in a while.
You're gonna hit today.
Yes, as Ben Shapiro says, he's very good at swinging hammers. Sometimes he hits a nail, sometimes he hits a baby. Yes. But yeah, like I that's the part that I'm having trouble with. And the rhetoric that he uses, that then everybody on the right starts to then back up, when to me, I'm like, clearly this is wrong, guys. Like, we just need to go ahead and say, like, he's wrong, but we're going to continue. He's still our guy. We just think he's wrong sometimes. Like, that would be the way to go. But instead, it's more of like a fandom, like more of a fanatic thing going on with him, where he is the Falcons, and it doesn't matter how many times he loses a game, we're going to stick with him, and because he's our guy. That's where I start to drop off. I couldn't back Trump in the beginning. I didn't vote for anybody because I didn't think him or Hillary deserved mine or anybody else's vote. And now as you've seen, I'm very okay with him being impeached, and I'm not a never Trumper. There's way too. I've posted things where I've said, like, guys, please stop making me defend Donald Trump. This is somebody that I really do not like. But y'all go after him on all the wrong things. You go after him for things he's not even doing.
Yep.
You say he says things he never even said. So I'm not a never Trumper, but I'm not an always Trumper or even a Trumper at all. Like, I don't like him. I don't think he should be there. I'm happy when he does good. I'm upset when he does bad. But I really would rather somebody else be sitting in that seat.
Yeah, look, I don't disagree. I think let's look back on like the last 8 years before Donald Trump. You had John McCain, who was Hitler, who was a racist. All right, so he never swung back
until he died. Once he died, then he was,
of course, no. As soon as he started going up against Trump, he was a hero. All of a sudden, he was so wonderful, and everybody forgot he was Hitler. I don't know how that happens, but everybody forgot. Short memories, I suppose. So you got him. They spend, the entire campaign calling him a racist, blah, blah, blah. Then you have Mitt Romney. Like, you want to talk about pure? Like, as Ben Shapiro says, the most milquetoast person ever runs for president. He hates women. He's a racist. It's like, so finally, and this is not just in politics, right? This is in everyday discourse. People on the left, if you disagree with him, you're racist. If you think that, like, we should screen people who come in this country, you're racist. If you think people should work, you're a racist. And you're like, finally, I think conservatives were like, am I allowed to cuss on this?
You've already cussed it. I don't think it makes a difference now.
Finally, conservatives are just like, fuck you. Like, fine. You want somebody controversial? We introduce Donald J. Trump. And he fought back. Yes. And that was why he won, right? I mean, yes. That's what conservatives wanted. We were so sick. I don't know about you. I think most conservatives were so sick and tired of being told that they were evil and racist and homophobes and xenophobes. And finally we're like, you know what? We got the guy for the job. Mm-hmm. And do I cringe at some of the stuff he tweets? Yes. Yes. It's so funny. When he was elected, my stepkids, they love him. They're kids, right? So like they agree, their family agrees with what he says, and not says, but the things that he believes in. And so they're like, do you like him? And I said, I like him when he supports policies I like and ideas I like, and I don't like him when he says dumb things. That's it. He's not my friend. He's not my pastor. He's my president. I want him to pass good policy. Do I wish he was more presidential and didn't talk like a 6-year-old? Yes, absolutely. But I want somebody who, at the end of the day, you've heard me say this about regular people, politicians, I want somebody who loves this country. I want somebody who understands that this country is a miracle. That, like, there's no white privilege, this privilege. It's American privilege. We are so lucky to be here. And he gets that. And Obama was presidential. He was charismatic. He was handsome. He didn't get that.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't feel like that man loved this country. Does this country have problems? Of course. Of course. America's not perfect. No country's perfect. But compared to everybody else, we're damn close.
Sure. Yeah, I understand the feeling to want to vote Trump up in it, especially with all of the labels of racism and things like that. If you watched a lot of leftist media, which I do, you'll understand though that they feel the same exact way. They hate the labels. They feel like their politicians aren't actually getting anything done for them. They feel like the right just runs everything and tells everybody what to do, and the left just has to obey. They feel like their politicians aren't actually aggressive enough, and that they don't actually fight for them enough. And I'm serious. This is rampant. Ask any leftist; they will tell you the same thing, that their politicians just are not doing what needs to be done. They're not aggressive. That all of the Republicans are, doing all of these backdoor deals, and they're doing whatever they have to do for their constituents to get what they need, and the Democrats are just being run over the whole time. And so then we vote in Donald Trump, and now it's 10 times what they thought it was before. And I think with a little bit of foresight, we could have seen that whatever their response is to Donald Trump is going to be much worse for us. And so I that's where I'm most afraid, I guess, or where I have the biggest problem, is that when the farther we go to the right, the farther they're going to go to the left, and the pendulum's just going to keep swinging back and forth. And somebody now like Bernie Sanders is going to end up being the nominee, and um, and somebody like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez becomes more and more prominent, and each side, the Overton window just keeps getting bigger and bigger. But it's not just going in one direction; it's going straight down the middle, to where somebody who is more in the middle becomes rare, and people who are farther out to the side are more common.
Yeah, and I think that's normal, right? Usually it starts with one side starting to move, and they win, and in this case it was the left who started to move left. I think that was my observation, right? Barack Obama moved pretty far, much further to the left than he seemed like he would when he was first elected. And that tends to happen, right? I mean, things go further to the left, things get much more hostile, or they did in this case, because of the rhetoric. And so then you've got people moving to the right. So you're starting to you're not normalizing, but when you normalize something very far to the left, well, yeah, things are going to get normalized really far to the right. They're both toxic for
Yep.
this country. I don't think Donald Trump is far to the right. I think he's a conservative. I don't think he's a conservative, but he governs like a conservative. And I think if he didn't have the rhetoric, that would be fine. But I almost feel like, look, I don't think everything he does is 4D chess. I'm not one of those people. Like, I really hate some of the things he says. I can't stand. But man, does he know how to get the media going. Like, Trump derangement syndrome is a thing, and he knows how to get them going and how to make them look crazy. All they had to do, Ben Shapiro says this, and I completely agree with him. All they had to do was not be crazy, and they can't do it. All they had to do was put up normal people who were like, look, the way we believe in normal things. We want, we want immigrants, but we want to know who's coming in. Abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. Now it's like, kill babies after they're born, let everybody in undocumented, who cares? It's like, guys, what are you doing? If I'm an advisor to the Democrats, I'm like, hey, let's go back to first era Obama, and you will win in a landslide. That's all you have to do. But they can't do it because their base. Oh my, but I'm terrified. As somebody who's from a communist country, I am terrified by what I'm seeing.
Yeah,
I'm terrified that there's even that big of a following. And I'm very scared of the alt-right as well. Because the further left the left goes, the more powerful the alt-right is going to get. And that is equally scary to me.
Yeah, the alt-right isn't actually powerful. So that's the thing
No.
when it comes to this, is when I talk to people and I say something like, you're like, people on the right have to constantly, if I want to go on a show or something like that, before I can say anything, I have to first start off by saying, I condemn the alt-right. I don't like the alt-right. I'm not racist because I'm a conservative. If I'm on the left, I don't have to say any of that. I don't have to make any of those distinctions. I can just come on and talk about whatever I want to talk about. But if I am a conservative or I'm on the right, I have to make sure that I say, I don't agree with the alt-right or I don't agree with racism. Whereas if you're on the left, you don't have to separate yourselves from the social justice warriors, from the socialists, from the communists, from all of the other crazies over there. And I told people, I'm like, it's kind of ridiculous that you guys can just, you have that freedom that, whereas we have to constantly make that distinction. And normally the answer I get back is, yeah, well, I think the alt-right is worse than Antifa or something like that. And I think, yeah, I mean, I guess, like, when you think about the alt-right is going out and they end up like killing people and things like that, and just starting these horrible tragedies all the time. But as far as power and political power and power in the media and stuff like that, the far left is growing more and more, and they get more and more attention. You don't have people like, what's his name, Spencer,
Richard Spencer.
Richard Spencer. Yes, he's not on Fox News or CNN or anything like that. He's not out there pitching his ideas, but everybody on the far left, they are. And not only are they, but their ideas start seeping in to mainstream ideology as well. For sure, in my head at least, and from what I see, Ben Shapiro seems to really not even consider this as a possibility, but I think it's almost definite that, man, I just blanked again. What is his name? I just said his name a minute ago.
Bernie?
Yes, that Bernie Sanders wins. I'm almost positive that Bernie Sanders is going to win. Like, I see no other person possibly winning, except for maybe Pocahontas. Like, maybe.
Pocahontas. Pocahontas.
Pocahontas. Oh, okay. Dude, she is something else, man. Like really, when you talk about how they could just be normal and they could go with somebody like Tulsi Gabbard or Chan, like they cannot just be normal. They have to end up with the biggest crazies out in front. And maybe that's to fight the other biggest crazy on the right. Like maybe that's what they're thinking is they need somebody who's just as outlandish and just as crazy to go up against somebody like Donald Trump. I don't know, but uh, it, I think Bernie Sanders, who is not all that crazy, his ideology is much farther left than anything in the mainstream, but he's not. He doesn't have scandals. He doesn't have lies. He doesn't have all of these crazy things coming out about him all the time, and he doesn't act stupid. Um, so
Yeah. Here's the thing. I feel like if you are a conservative, there's always going to be things coming out about you. Because that's just how, like, Barack Obama was president for 8 years, and there were plenty of scandals. But everybody's like, oh, Barack Obama had no scandals. It's like, no, he did. The media just didn't cover them.
yeah, that drives
Bernie
me
was a
nuts.
conservative. He may be clean as I mean, look, Mitt Romney was clean as a whistle, and it was like he's a racist. He hates women. He's binders full of women, whatever that means.
Yeah.
And it's just, and I think that's why conservatives like Donald Trump. Like the hammer thing is really attractive because it it's exhausting. It's just exhausting doing like what you said, having to be like, I condemn the alt right. It's like, why do I have to say that? Because I'm a conservative. Like you lefties have more in common with these alt-right people than I do. I don't believe in identity politics. I don't think that people should think a certain way or act a certain way because they're black or gay or white or male or female. Like, I don't care. I don't think these things matter. You do. And so does the alt-right. And you guys are really close on these ideas. Um, Especially because I don't know about you, but when I hear some of the things that the left says, I'm like, you guys are racists.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're a racist if you think that Black people need welfare. I don't think they need welfare. I think they can work.
Sure.
I think they're productive human beings who have been completely, like, taken down the wrong path by bad policy. You apparently don't. You think that they need, now I'm blanking. Um, Starts with an A, says like you have to have a certain amount of people, different color, like people of color, religion, whatever, in school.
Oh, yeah, I can't think of it either. It's late at night.
Affirmative action.
Affirmative action, yeah.
You
I
think
can
like
never think of affirmative action. I swear. I tried I'm serious. Like everybody in my family knows now if I say like, you know that one thing, like it's affirmative action almost every time. I can never think of affirmative action. I don't know why.
but it's so racist. Like we probably needed that at some point, right? Because
Sure.
we were racist, but we're not anymore.
Yeah, we're a
And
little late.
you know what? Like now, I'm kind of like, look, if you don't want to hire somebody who's really good because they're black, that's fine. I'll hire them. Please don't hire them. Please be a racist. I want to hire them
Well,
because what I care about is how good they are.
I would agree with you, except for there's a study that says like Jim and Sandy have an easier time getting a job than Jamal and Shaniqua.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this massive study that they put out where they put in thousands of applications all over the place with half of them sounding like very, very black sounding names.
Mm-hmm.
And the other ones were very, very white sounding names. And the ones with white sounding names got callbacks for an interview at like 3 times the rate than the people with the black sounding names. And so I thought the same thing for a while. That study, it's a little bit dated. I think maybe it came out in like 2003 or 2004, but we haven't moved that far, maybe even backwards since then. So I don't know. It makes me
Well, But they did a similar study with last names,
Mhm.
and the outcomes were different.
Okay.
There
What
are certain names that the Black community, last names that people in the Black community tend to have, and people like know a lot of them, and that
but
had no.
aren't those common names from like large slave owners and stuff like that who were white
Yes,
anyways?
but now like they're known as like Brown is a Black last name. Um, those outcomes were different. Like even though that's well known, the outcomes were different. Look, if somebody's name is like Shanquisha, I'm not saying this is right. Okay, I'm not like when I'm defending things. I'm sad I have to say this, but that doesn't mean I agree with people's mentality. Just think it's important to explore it.
Mhm.
When somebody thinks that, they might think that maybe that person's upbringing or surroundings did not make for um, did not promulgate like professionalism, let's say, right? Like I don't know how to say that, but
Sure.
do you see what I'm saying? Like
Yes.
maybe somebody who named their kid that wasn't like, you need to be, a doctor, you need to like be professional, you need to, and that's wrong because
Mhm.
there's plenty of people named that whose families do promulgate those things.
Right.
But it's not necessarily racism. I think it's more of like just a feeling people get. I think any funky name, people are going to be like, I don't, I guess I don't know what to expect, right? That's what they're thinking. I don't really know what to expect. So maybe I just like don't do that. Maybe just don't go down that route.
Yeah. Some people want to say it's classism or culturalism or tribalism. I think it's closer to tribalism than anything else. So, say there's a black person, and I don't want to say who acts white, but who acts more in line with, um, I guess, white standards or culture, or because even at this point, if you say the white people are the majority of the country, then you can just say it's American culture. Then, um, then they're more likely to be able to get along with other people, and it's the same. If I'm a white person and I go to Mexico or something like that, and try to get a job, like it's more likely that I'm the one who's going to struggle assimilating with them, and they're going to make that assumption as well before ever even meeting me. And so I I think that we've had uh, we've had a trouble with integration from both sides. So it's black people who have resentment towards white people and therefore separate themselves a lot of the time and live in their own communities and kind of separate themselves off uh, from the rest of the world and depend on each other for things instead of
Mhm.
integrating with everybody else. And white people are just as much to blame for that as well. And it's all just really tribalism than anything else, where we all like things that are similar to us. And I don't know if that's a problem that we can actually fix.
I guess my question is it a problem? If
I don't
people
know.
voluntarily wanting to live with people with similar cultures, Black families tend to be more religious, right? Their Christianity is a big part of their lives, which is awesome, and maybe less so in certain white communities. And so maybe they want to be in a community where their types of churches that worship the way they want to worship, and they got some awesome food. And so maybe they want their, restaurants, a lot more restaurants that they want to go to. And I don't see anything wrong with it as long as nothing is forced, right? Like you never, that's when it becomes an issue. Nothing should ever be forced.
I would say I would agree with you, except for the fact that because of the tribalism, then classism does become an issue. And so the classism stems from tribalism. And so when you say, like, oh, well, black people and minorities have trouble making as much money as somebody who's white, you can turn around and say, oh, well, that's more of a problem with two-parent households and things like that, which I would agree with. But that's a problem within tribalism, within the community, that needs to be snuffed out. And maybe the only way that it can be snuffed out is by better integration. My brother is a big proponent of affirmative action because he believes that them going to college and seeing other kids who grew up with two-parent households and things like that would actually motivate them to make sure that they either don't have kids until they're married, or they get married and don't get divorced until their children are grown and adults and moved out. And um, I can't necessarily disagree with that, but I still have issues with affirmative action for many other reasons. But I just think that tribalism is uh, an issue, just not one that I think we can fix. And I think that everybody wants to fix it, and it can't be fixed, especially not with identity politics, because with that, you're more putting somebody into a box and saying you need to abide by these standards. And that's where you actually end up just multiplying the issues instead of getting rid of them. We got a little bit of time left. We can we got Donald Trump, who might be getting impeached. Oh, before we get to that, actually, you said you watched Ben Shapiro. I think he talked about this 2 or 3 days ago. There's a guy named James Younger, and not the artist, but he lives in Texas, and he has two twin boys.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh, yeah.
they got him and his wife got a divorce. And as far as I understand, I'm not an expert on this, but as far as I understand, in Texas, when you get a divorce, each person gets assigned specific responsibilities if both parents still have custody. And so one parent has to make sure that they're driven to school every day. One parent has to make sure that they pay the dental bills. One parent has to make sure that they have clothes. One parent, and it's just back and forth. Each one has specific responsibilities that they have to take care of, especially financially. And the son, it goes over to the dad's all the time, and then they go to the moms. It's two twin boys, and one day they go to the dad's, and one of the boys, I think his name was also James or Daniel, and he goes and tells his dad that he wants to be called a girl's name now. And his dad's like, why? And he's like, because mom says I'm a girl. And he's like, what are you talking about? Do you think you're a girl? And he's like, yeah, like, why not? Mom says I'm a girl, so I'm a girl. And I want to go by this girl's name now. And so the dad finds out that the kid's actually using the girl's bathroom at school now, that he's going by this girl's name, that when he's at his mom's house, he wears dresses and makeup and all, has hair clips in his hair and all sorts of things. And then when he's at his dad's house, he wears boys' clothes and goes by his boy name. And his twin brother, all the meantime, is still has nothing to do with any of this. He's got his regular name. He's still got the same gender he was born with. But the mom, from the dad's story at least, the mom doesn't seem to be refuting this very well. She doesn't deny that she is forcing this on the kid, but it ends up going to court. And at this point, even puberty blockers are being looked at as from the mom's side. And they have him go to a counselor, or the dad wanted to send the boy to counseling, but that's not within his purview. He was not assigned counseling when they got the divorce. The mom is in charge of counseling, and she says, no, I'm not sending him to counseling. So the dad can't do that. So they send the boy to a social worker after they go to court over this. And the boy tells the social worker I want to be a girl when I'm at my mom's house, and I want to be a boy when I'm at my dad's house. And the dad's not allowed at school or or birthday parties or anything like that because they're afraid that he might call his son by a boy's name when he's around everybody else. Not that he's going to confuse the boy or the girl or whatever. The I forget the name he wanted to be called. It's like
Lola.
Lola or Luna. Yeah,
Luna. I'm sorry.
Luna.
Luna. Yes. Sorry.
Yes. So it's not that the boy is going, it's not that Luna is going to be confused by any of this. It's that the people around him, the kids and the parents around him at school or at his birthday parties or whatever, that they might be confused by this. And so the dad is not allowed to go to these things in fear of them confusing the people around the kid. And it's hard to figure out in this case, is he really like identifying as a different gender than what he was born with? Or is he just trying to please both of his parents? Does he just want to be loved by both of his parents? And so he's willing to appease whichever one of them he's with at that point. This is a story that lots of us say like, oh well, this is a slippery slope when you let children start being including in these sorts of things, and everyone says, oh, that's a crazy story, that'll never actually happen. They said the same thing about dragons too, but now there's numerous women who are identifying as dragons now.
Why not? Why
yeah.
can't I identify as a dragon?
Yeah, they said nobody would actually do that, though. That's not a real thing. That's never happened, so we don't need to worry about it. Well, here it is. Now there's people identifying as dragons. So yeah, it's one of those slippery slope stories where now it is happening, and now we don't know what to do about it.
Well, and slippery slope or not, you don't let your kids decide what they're going to wear. Why are you letting them decide their gender? 80% of kids who have experienced gender dysphoria as children, it is resolved, meaning they decide they are the gender that they are, their gender is their sex. That's what they decide by the time, I think it's like 15 or 16. I think at that point, like kids kind of know what they are by then. 80% of the time. So what this mom wants to do is take her son, who is obviously confused, put him on pubic blockers, like physically change him when, and I'm sure she knows, right? Like I think it's more or less common knowledge that 80% of children this resolves.
Meaning, when you say it resolves, meaning it goes away.
It goes away. Yeah. When I say it resolves, it means a boy says, oh, yeah, of course I'm a boy. I'm not a girl. I know I said I might be a girl, but I'm not a girl. I'm a boy. And I don't understand why we are taking people who suffer from a type of body dysmorphia and telling them that they're okay. That what they're feeling is totally fine. That all they have to do is chop off their penis, get a vagina, go on some hormones, and they will be happy. When the data doesn't show that, the data does not show in the long term, there is very little difference. I don't know, your audience probably knows this. The suicidality rate in the transgender community is 40%. Lifetime suicidality. It is not statistically significantly lower after transition.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning this person probably didn't need to transition. What they needed was therapy. Something happened to them that made them not want to be them anymore. They were sexually abused. They went through a traumatic experience. They suffer from anxiety, depression, some sort of PTSD. And instead of helping them get through those things, you just tell them, just change yourself. And you know it's not going to help them.
Well, when you're a kid, you don't actually have a strong identity anyways. Like you said, your parents pick out your clothes. Like you don't really have a strong identity in who you are. If my mom when I was a kid started dressing me up in dresses and wearing makeup and stuff after, when I was 10 years old, this kid's 7. But even when I was 10 years old, I probably wouldn't have thought too much about it. I would have been like, okay, like I guess I can be a girl from now on.
Yeah.
Whatever. Like and even on top of that, like I was a curious little kid. I would go around like trying on my sister's bras and stuff, like wearing high heels, whatever. Like, you don't know enough about yourself or who you are at that age to to make these sorts of decisions, especially not puberty blockers where you're changing the chemistry in your body. And they say, well, this is all reversible. No, it's not reversible, but you're able to, I guess, backtrack on the damage that you've already done, but not fully.
Right.
What you go through in puberty is not replicable. It's not. You cannot do it when you're 25 or 30 years old. It's not the same. You will never have the same, um, I guess, biology that you would have ended up with if
Yes.
you had not taken puberty blockers. So it really is amazing that this is even legal. Like it has to be child abuse.
It is child abuse. It has to be. You're right. I mean, it's how do you do this to a child? This child, like you said, children have no sense of sexuality, not until they're older. I mean, I don't know if you knew this, but when I was in elementary school, I was like a major tomboy. Major tomboy. By the time I was in 6th grade, I was wearing like dresses and high heels to school every day. Like it lasted for a year. What if my mom had been like, sure, babe, here's like a pair of Nike sneakers, here's like some cargo shorts, and I would have thought I was a boy. In fact, Candace Owens on her show had a guest. Did you listen to this episode by chance?
I don't know.
Walter something, who was a transgender woman. When he was, I think, 7, maybe 5, I'm not young, very young, his grandmother, for some reason, put him in like a purple dress. And every time he went to her house, she would put him in this purple dress. And soon he was like, I like dresses. I'm a girl. And his parents like didn't fight him on it. And then he was sexually abused by an uncle. And then I think he tried to like live out his life as like a cis man. And I think he got married. I don't remember the story for sure, but he ended up transitioning. He spent 9 years as a woman. And then he realized that what he was really suffering from was PTSD from being sexually abused. That's what he was suffering from. And now he runs he transitioned back, which, like you said, means he has a penis, but it does not function like a penis. And so, like you said, it's not reversible. There is trauma that goes with that. But he now runs an organization trying to help people suffering from gender dysphoria figure out what the root cause is. Find alternatives to transitioning that might actually truly cure them of their suffering, because I cannot imagine the suffering. I think it's so sad and so tragic. And he said that within 2 times of talking to them, he can usually figure out, together they can figure out where this started. At what point did this person not want to be themselves? And people, Candace actually said she read an article about a woman who weighed 400 pounds who was sexually assaulted when she was younger. And so she like wanted to not be attractive to men because she never wanted that to happen again.
Yeah.
Well, next thing she knows, she's 400 pounds, right? So something started that. And we have to help people with the things they're actually suffering from instead of virtue signaling and being like, oh yeah, it's totally normal. You want to be a girl. You just lay down on that surgical table. We'll take care of that right away. It's evil. I really do. I do think it's evil.
Yeah, definitely. I have sympathy for these people who are struggling with this sort of stuff. And there's lots of stories, like you said, about women who are sexually abused or raped or something like that, and then they go on to gain a lot of weight. There's a very famous story of a woman who was a model for a long time, and then got sexually abused and gained like another 100 pounds immediately after, and stopped modeling and did not want to be attractive to men anymore. She saw it as something that was not beneficial to her anymore. Um, so we did get into Trump a little bit on him being impeached. We had some people who were adamant that him wanting Biden to be investigated was illegal by itself. Um, Let me just for a second lay this out, I guess, because it's fascinating to me. Somebody who doesn't have a horse in the race or a dog in the fight. I don't really care if Trump gets impeached or not. To watch both sides, and it really has just been a lot of fun, honestly, because it, like, at first they come out and there's the whistleblower report, and it says that Trump wanted to investigate Ukraine Trump says he wanted to investigate Ukraine to see if they were corrupt and was holding on to their money in the meantime. And I guess Giuliani goes over there and investigates this, and then finds out that Joe Biden is somewhat involved, and he calls Trump and he's like, hey, do we want to include Joe Biden in on this? Like, that would be great, wouldn't it? Like, we would kill two birds with one stone. And Trump's like, heck yeah, let's do that. So then he calls the guy in Ukraine, the president, and says, hey, like, we want you to help us with this. We want to make sure that you're playing ball. So just investigate this corruption. Joe Biden might be involved. And so then the whistleblower report comes out and pretty much says, we're blowing the whistle on Donald Trump for blowing the whistle on Joe Biden. And that is just crazy to me, that Donald Trump wants somebody to be investigated for committing a crime, and the crime that they want him to be investigated for is holding Ukraine's money until they did what he wanted, which was investigate or stop investigating another company that his son worked for. Like, this is all too similar. You cannot say that Joe Biden shouldn't be investigated, but Donald Trump should be investigated. And then the corruption that's coming from the intelligence community as well. Like, this is all so dirty. Like, it's got problems all over it, especially with Schiff tweeting about the whistleblower report 2 weeks before he supposedly ever even saw it. Like, he was saying Donald Trump is holding Ukrainian aid from them, and this needs to be investigated. He was saying that 2 weeks before he ever supposedly found out about it. Like, it is obvious that Schiff had something to do with this, that this was all something that was drummed up. And they helped the whistleblower write out the report, and they said, like, hey, look, we'll tell you, who your sources were and what you heard, and we'll word this correctly to make sure that it all sounds very bad for Donald Trump. And then normally you have some sort of thing like this, like with Watergate, I guess, with Nixon, where it's hard to prove that he actually did something wrong or that he was in on the conspiracy. So your better option is to go after the cover-up, right? Mm-hmm. And so with Nixon, like, we don't know if he had anything to do with that stuff. What we do know, though, is that he found out about it afterwards and he covered it up. So he got in trouble for it. Or you got Hillary Clinton, who's got this email server. We don't know that there was anything, I guess, confidential on it or anything like that. But we do know that she deleted all of the emails off of the server. We do know she covered it up. So that's what gets her. So with Trump, they're trying to find the cover up. And the next day, he comes out and says, hey, China, I think you should investigate Biden as well. It's like, what? They can't prove any sort of cover up now. He's doing this openly all the time, telling everybody should investigate Biden. You should all get him. Like, I understand what they're saying, that you shouldn't be able to use your power to go after political opponents. But if the political opponent actually did something wrong and you're correct about them doing something wrong, and they're found guilty on doing this something wrong, then it's not you just going after them for political power. You're going after them for corruption. You're going after them for them actually doing something wrong. There can't be anything wrong with that. That can't be illegal.
It is when Trump does it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Which is why the man got elected. But you're right. Look, Trump sounds off like all the time. It's just what he does. It's who he is. Like, we all need to like stop paying attention to what he says so much. Honestly, it will save you many gray hairs to stop paying attention to what he says and pay attention to what he does.
Sure.
And I read that transcript, and I read what I saw was him saying, I want you guys to clean up your act, including figuring out what the hell happened with this whole Biden thing. Like, what happened there? He never said, I'm withholding your money for that. He never said that. They had no idea at the time the money was being withheld. So there's no quid pro quo. And look, I also heard Ben say, like, he's acting on bad information. You know, William Barr just opened up the investigation into Ukraine's involvement in the election. And he's saying that Giuliani is going off of bad information. I don't know how he knows that, or if he knows that. Maybe he just suspects it. But the fact of the matter is, it's like, look, if Trump thinks that something is going on there, then he's asking Ukraine to investigate the 2016 election, not anything for the 2020 election. I don't see how including Biden's son, just being like, I also want to know about this. He didn't say, like, there's no Steele dossier, right? He's not like asking them to put together something. He's like, I want you to investigate all this stuff.
Yep.
And my understanding, by the way, is that asking for information is not illegal. Unless you say, you give me information and I'll give you XYZ. That, of course, is illegal. That's the quid pro quo. But my understanding is that just saying, like, hey, I want the information you have on Biden, I don't think that's illegal. I know that, like, people in that post were like, that's illegal, but that's not what I was reading or hearing.
It's illegal if they give him information and then he turns around and leaks it to the press or uses it in the press against Joe Biden to win the election. But that's some Minority Report crap to say, oh, he was only asking for the information so that he could leak it to the press. Like, you can't know that. You can't know that that's the only reason he was asking for the information. You guys jumped on this way too early. Him asking for the information is not illegal. If you had waited, maybe he would have gotten some information. Maybe he would have leaked it out to the press, and then you could have come out with all of this stuff. But they jumped on it way too quickly. They started impeachment proceedings before they even read the whistleblower report, which blows my mind. Like, what are they thinking? They're not including the other side of the aisle in these inquiries, where they're not letting Republicans vote on whether or not there's an impeachment proceeding or investigation.
And they're closed door proceedings. How is this legal is my question. Like, I don't pretend to be a constitutional scholar. How is this legal? They won't let the press in there. They won't let Republicans in there. Like, look, you know, I don't have to, like, that's how I know it's crap, right? Because why not let if I want to impeach Obama and I actually have something, I'm like, come on, guys, come on in, press, come on in, Democrats, like, go ahead, have a look. But they're not doing that, which makes it obvious they have nothing.
Right.
Just, it's going to be the Russia thing all over again.
Yeah.
Millions, tens of millions of dollars, and 2 years later, and it's going to be like, no evidence. he might have obstructed justice. Maybe. If telling people, please do this, and then when they say no, being like, okay, is obstructing justice.
Sure.
That's a pretty low standard. I know that the language says that, but I don't think that's like when he said, like, I hope you'll be easy on Flynn. Well, that could have been considered obstruction of justice under that standard. But I
Right.
don't think hoping is obstruction.
Right. No, and all of these things are replicated on the left. You can find them doing all of these same things, all the Democrats. It's just not important or illegal when they do it. It doesn't matter when they do it. I mean, the Steele dossier is a great example of somebody trying to use foreign governments and to get information on their political opponent, and nobody really cared. I mean, the press got it, ran with it, used it, read from it daily, and even though half of it turned out to be bullcrap anyways, it was still perfectly okay back then. I have a video that I put out a little while ago about the Lewandowski hearings, and like you can tell that Republicans and Democrats are just butting heads nonstop. Like they are not working together. They're not trying to work together. They don't care to work together. All they care is that their side wins right now. That's all that matters.
This little battle, nobody's thinking about the war. Nobody's thinking about the country.
And this is both sides, right? This is not just Democrats. This is Republicans then playing little games while Democrats might be bringing in these, starting these dumb hearings and having these people come in just to make it sound bad or look bad for somebody. And then Republicans start to play other games to make it so that the person doesn't have to answer questions as much. And it's all, and both sides are getting frustrated with each other and they're just butting heads. And it is not beneficial to our country at all. But this is what all of us are pretty much doing now when we're having conversations trying to talk about what it is we believe. Uh,
Yeah.
in the end, all we end up doing is butting heads uh, and not really having conversations about things or ever agreeing on anything because all we care about is winning the argument and not actually having anything beneficial or fruitful come from it.
Yeah. And I agree. I mean, I really try. Look, I want to win as much as the next person, but when I engage in discourse, I mean, I think you've seen, I try to like put in data, evidence, like, and it's because I want, I want, it's not that I want to win, but it's like, I really believe in what I'm saying. And I maybe sometimes I think that what you're saying is dangerous to the future of the country. Not in all cases, but or isn't productive, is not going to be a positive thing for the future. And so I want to disseminate facts and I hope to bring people over that way. And it's not very successful, which is disappointing because I haven't really had people on the left, like when I give data, they don't give me data back.
Mm-hmm.
They're just like, no. I'm like, okay, well, math, I don't know what to say to that. Or these ad hominem arguments like, this is racist. I'm like, they're numbers.
Right.
Numbers aren't racist.
Sure. I would challenge you to watch some of these other shows that I'm talking about. So probably the best two debaters that I know are both on the left. It's Destiny and Sam Cedar. These guys just happen to shred everybody. Um, I think somebody like Ben Shapiro is better with debate tactics. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why he's good at debating, not necessarily so much on the information, but more on tactical debating. Whereas these guys, they have the information, they're confident that they're correct, they're good at explaining the information in a way to where you can understand exactly what it is that they're talking about or how they came to the conclusion that they came to. again, I don't agree with everything that they say. Nobody agrees with everything that anybody says. It's funny. Anytime anybody says anything to about my channel, they're like, "Man, I like watching your channel. I enjoy it. I don't agree with everything that you say, but I like watching your channel." That's like always. There's always that tag somewhere in there at the beginning, the end, the middle. It's always, I don't agree with everything you say. I don't expect anybody to agree with everything that I
Yeah.
say. That's not the point in this podcast. The point isn't to convince anybody. The point is to get them to see different sides of things and understand that other people have reasons for what they believe and why they believe it. It's not just something that they came up with randomly one day. It's not just something that they heard and repeated it. No, everybody has reasons for what they believe and why they believe it. And I want to hear those things. I want to hear what it is they believe. I want to know why it is that they believe it. Because maybe I'll believe it too. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just understand why you believe that thing and we'll move on from there. So,
So I have a question for you on that note. When there was the whole debate on your page on the Ukraine thing, and I got involved in that, whether or not it was illegal. And when I read one place where you said that um, you do think Trump was probably guilty in the Russia probe, and I'm curious, like, why you think that, based on what?
okay, so that I'm I don't think that there's enough information there for us to actually for him to be incriminated legally. But just based on actions, based on meetings that took place, we don't know what happened in those meetings, which is why we can't prove anything. So, which is why I'm on his side as far as saying we can't prove enough to impeach him for this. We can't prove enough for him to get arrested. That would be ridiculous. There's not nearly enough information. But there's enough information there for me to have an opinion that somebody who is innocent wouldn't have gone along with this and wouldn't have taken it this far. So,
Okay,
and just knowing Trump and who he is and how he does business, like I don't have trouble believing it.
gotcha. Okay, I was curious about that.
Yeah. I wasn't saying that like the whole, because no, the whole Russia investigation was pure bullcrap. They didn't, they were never going to get enough information. That was clear from the beginning, and they still went along with it anyways, just because it made them look bad the whole time they did it. So yeah, I I have trouble on this channel for those same reasons. I If I was like a Ben Shapiro or somebody who was like very stern on I guess right Republican talking points or just firmly on the left with CNN repeating their stuff or something like that, I think that I would have an easier time building a base, but I don't because because I in almost every sentence I will have something that everybody disagrees with.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
it's hard for like the Lewandowski hearings in that video. There were so many people who watched it, and the whole time I'm ripping on both Republicans and Democrats the entire time. But you go to the comment section and it's somebody really upset that all I did was rip on Democrats. And then there's somebody else who's upset that all I did was rip on Republicans. And it's like that's all they hear is I disagree with them on one thing, therefore I'm against them. I don't like I I'm more conservative than anything else, but if I don't repeat the same exact things as everybody else, if I think Fox News is a bunch of conspiracy theorists and idiots, then I'm no longer on the right. I'm no longer a conservative anymore because I don't uh, fight the same fight that they did.
Yeah, I get it. And I mean, that's why I kind of hate the policy discussion, right? Or the current event discussion on its own. I think it's so important to dig into the ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't know, I struggle with, where are we going? right? Because free speech is under attack. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg, who has been pretty hard on conservatives on his platform for sure,
Yeah.
goes out and talks about free speech. Now, whether or not he actually like does that in practice is a different story, but he said all the right things about free speech. And I feel like as Americans, we should all be applauding him since that's like our First Amendment. And the left just ripped him a new one.
Mm-hmm.
It's like all this guy is saying is that speech isn't violence and you should be able to say whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that Twitter and Facebook, talking about the pendulum swinging, I hope that they understand that by silencing mainstream conservatives, right, and putting them in a box with the alt-right, all they're doing is taking people who may not be alt-right but are on the fringes and pushing them to the alt-right. And they're pushing them underground where you don't know what they're saying, you can't debate them, you can't provide a different point of view. They're being indoctrinated. Same thing that's happening on the left is happening on the right. And that's where this violence is coming from that you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's awful. And I really hope that there's some sort of awakening. Maybe after Trump, maybe the next person is a more polished conservative, right? Or just libertarian or whatever, but just believes in American ideals, but is more polished and less abrasive. And I hope that that's where this goes because I am terrified of every single one of those candidates on the left right now. I'm not really afraid of Biden, but I am afraid of what happens to Biden if he gets elected. Like, is he going to keep pandering to the far left, or is he just doing that to win the nomination? And that's scary. I know what that looks like. I mean, I've been reading, like I said, my family's from the Soviet Union. I've been reading The Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Wow. It's hard to read. I mean, there are times where I actually have to put it down because it's so graphic and vivid and it's so dark. I have to put it down sometimes and just take a break. It's scary. And people are like, oh, you're crazy. Here's your tinfoil hat. It's like, yeah, that's what they said in Russia too in 1917.
Right. Well, yeah, the motto of the podcast is to challenge your thoughts. And so I hope for anybody watching, we did that today, that you got some different ideas and uh, can think about some things differently and understand other people's sides. But also, anybody who watches leftist media or mainly right media, get out of your bubble, get out, watch different things, understand that both sides are wrong a lot of the time. And maybe you'll, may, we all like to talk about how much I can't think of the word right now, but how much fighting there is between the right and the left, Democrats and Republicans, or liberals and conservatives. Uh, we all have to be the ones who do something different, though. We have to be the ones who go in and find something different and find a new answer to kind of change that. And so I challenge everybody to do that. I appreciate you coming on, Daniela.
This
I
is great.
enjoyed, yeah, I enjoyed the conversation, and I will hopefully have you back on if I'm still doing this.
You should keep doing it. It's awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate